Thanks everybody for jumping in to another panel here at Dallas Startup Week 2020. This is the Gaming and Esports track, and I am your track captain, Justin Varghese. It's no secret, Collegiate Esports has been blowing up like crazy, in particular in the DFW area, and I'm very excited to have assembled an incredible group of folks who are really moving mountains here in the DFW space. And Dylan, our little Austin transplant, who's going to be moderating this whole thing. As always, if you have any questions throughout this panel, feel free to chime in via chat. I'll be correlating and tabulating all the questions that I see, rounding them up for a dedicated audience Q&A section at the end. With that, Dylan Liu, why don't you go ahead and take it away and kick this panel off?
Cool. So yeah, just wanted to make some short introductions. I guess we'll just go down the line just so everyone knows who we are. I'm Dylan Liu. I'm CEO of Uconnect Esports, and we're a sponsorship marketplace that allows brands to activate in collegiate esports communities. And then I guess we'll just go down the line. Drew, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your program?
Yeah, my name is Drew Boehm. Oversee the varsity program at the University of Texas at Arlington. And we currently compete in League of Legends, Overwatch, and Rocket League.
Awesome. Greg?
My name is Greg Adler. I'm the coach of esports at the University of Texas at Dallas. We're entering our third year here, and we compete in League of Legends, Overwatch, Rocket League, and Smash Ultimate.
Awesome. Dylan?
Hey, my name is Dylan Ray, and I'm the esports coordinator for the University of North Texas. At UNT, we facilitate competitions for League of Legends, Overwatch, and Rocket League, as well as a bunch of clubs on our campus as well that compete in the other titles.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to mention to everybody, like all of these schools, all y'all's programs, they're very decorated. You guys have like a very storied history of championships, of going to finals. You guys are pretty up there in terms of competitive quality. So just wanted to add that in there just so you guys have a perspective on that. But I just wanted to start it off with just talking about collegiate esports in Texas. Because Texas is so big, we've seen two very unique collegiate esports ecosystems develop in North Texas and in South Texas, right? So what do you think North Texas does well, and what are some ways that South Texas has grown that you'd like to see in the North Texas ecosystem in the future? We'll start off with you, I guess, Drew.
I can say something. So, one thing that I really love about being in North Texas is, obviously there are a lot of really competitive programs. But a lot of what's neat is, we all know each other pretty well. We all compete, but at the same time, it's like, we wish each other the best whenever we play against each other and that kind of stuff. So it's like, I really like the camaraderie is essentially what I'm trying to say among all of our varsity programs. Now, another thing is, with the South, I don't talk to them enough, to be frank, honestly. That's one thing that I want to happen more often, is basically coming together in the whole state of Texas. I think the North developed a little bit more quickly than a lot of places in the South have. And so, there's a lot of potential out there, and there's a lot of growth. But, I definitely want there to be more communication between the North and the South. Yeah.
And I think North Texas, you guys are unique in that, like, the South ecosystem is kind of it's technically the South, but it's spread out across like multiple cities, right? Whereas you guys are all like surrounding one big Dallas area, so you guys are able to it's a lot closer ecosystem. You guys, like, you can tell it's like notable that you guys are like really well connected and like really know each other really well. But Greg, what about your thoughts?
Well, I think as far as a whole, one thing that North Texas schools have done really well is I think create rivalries within. But off of that, we have a lot of localized support. I know Dylan's hosted a bunch of events at UNT. Last year, we had the event at Mavs Gaming where we had an Overwatch tournament. So I think we've done a really great job of creating localized competition. And through that localized competition, we've created rivals. We've played UNT and Overwatch like 9 times at this point in actual competition. And every time it's a super hyped up match. Both teams are super into it. So I think we've done a really great job of creating those rivalries from within our program starting off.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I can definitely tell you, like, I think North Texas is definitely a lot more competition focused. Like, even your community events are all very competition focused, whereas South Texas, we don't have that infrastructure for varsity programs, and a lot of it is centered around like LANs and social events, right? But Dylan, what about your thoughts? What do you like about the North Texas ecosystem, and what do you think? What are some cool things that South Texas is doing that you'd like to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely like to mirror what Drew and Greg have said about we're very good friends, but also we have some awesome rivalries. Like, it's always fantastic when UTA and UNT in Rocket League compete. That's always going to be a good time. It's just fun. And then with all of our other, all of our titles, whether it's LoL or Overwatch, it's really fun when we get to play. Whether it's at a physical event like at the Arlington Esports Stadium, or just in our digital competitions. It's really cool when we get lined up to compete. It's going to be a really good time, and so I really kind of value that. What I can really appreciate about the Southern Texas esports scene is they're far more willing to travel long distances. I think that's just a part of. And realistically, what makes Texas great is we're so big, and I think you really kind of see from like a physical standpoint, just a lot of folks in those programs are willing to drive long distances, even if we're just competing for like headsets or something like that. If you say competition, they're going to be there and they're going to compete, and it's really great to see.
And you mentioned the Arlington Esports Stadium, and I just wanted to kind of point out. The North Texas, esports startup scene is also a lot more developed than South Texas, because you guys have like a dedicated hub in Frisco, right? Have you guys like interacted with that? Obviously, you guys have gone to Arlington, been to the stadium and all that stuff, but have you guys made any connections, or would you like to see a little bit more connection between the esports entities in Frisco and the Collegiate Esports ecosystem? Because I know in Austin, we have it's kind of like Silicon Hills, like a little mini publisher hub, but we don't really see a lot of interaction. Like Dell is out there, AMD is out there, you have EA, but you don't really see any interaction between the collegiate community and the big corporate scene, the way that you see California companies interact with their collegiate ecosystems, right? So have you guys reached out to them, or have you guys talked to them, or would you like to see some connection there?
Well, I think there's been a decent amount of connection so far, right? Like we talked about with the Mavs gaming event last year, and there's been small off events that have had collegiate inclusion. I think the big thing is finding ways that these industries are able to be truly successful and mutually beneficial both ways. Because I think the collegiate space is growing, but I think it's still kind of in its infancy as far as where it lays in the overall industry. So I think there have been events that have kind of gotten to there, but I think the more and more we do, and the more we kind of look for these opportunities, like, how can we put college into this? How can we kind of include it as an aspect of our event as a whole? I think the more we do that and the more we kind of grow out, will only increase the amount of industries interested.
Kind of going off of what Greg said just briefly, I think that's one of the big problems with it. Is a lot of corporations or larger entities don't necessarily know how to approach it, or necessarily utilize it the right way. And I mean, a lot of that will kind of be solved, as time goes on and bigger companies get more involved. I mean, we have larger companies approach us, and larger entities want to work with us, but the problem just comes down to, okay, but what exactly do we do now? And so
it's a lack of fit problem rather than a lack of awareness.
I don't know if I'd say fit necessarily. It's more just how do we approach the situation to make it as beneficial as it could possibly be. There's definitely interest. It's just, what exactly is the next step now? So it's a lot of, not necessarily caution, but a lot of people, especially
they don't even know how to engage. Basically. Gotcha. And you guys have Samsung, by the way, too. I think they just held a Texas Collegiate PUBG Mobile tournament, because Samsung is also headquartered in Dallas. But Dylan, what about your thoughts? Have you guys, talked to any local companies or corporations, or where do you see that connection?
Yeah, so I think in the same vein of a athletics program where you have sponsors that support your college football team, for the UNT football team, or something like that. Esports kind of fits into that same type of business model. And I think when we've talked to folks and businesses that say, hey, we're essentially a digital athletics department, it clicks for a lot of people, and they're able to kind of understand what our relationship is like, with folks that are not endemic to the industry. What I think has been a really big strong suit for the DFW area also is that there's several professional teams in the area. And so, we're probably not the first people talking to, some of these big name organizations, that they've talked to, Envy or, Complexity. And so they may have already been either pitched or have an idea of what esports is. And so I think that's kind of helped a lot of conversations with various businesses that are not endemic to the industry, which I think really kind of helps a lot with the DFW area.
Do you think that's why? I was just like, I've always wondered why North Texas and South Texas went such different directions. North Texas went so far into the competitive side, and South Texas went so far in the community side. Then you bring up a good point. Like, you guys have so many competitive teams, and you guys are able. I don't know if you guys think that played a part in it, a major part in how that went. But I know South Texas. I don't know if you guys know, but the founders of TESPA, Michael Sherman, like me, all these entities that were super community event support based, they all came from the suburbs of Houston, Sugarland, Katy, all that stuff. So I don't know if there's a different mentality or something like that, but I always found that really interesting. And I always wondered about that. I've been in collegiate esports for a while, and I just that's always been something that's kind of been weird to me. But yeah, so you guys have been in collegiate esports for a good amount of time now. What are the most important lessons that you learned along the way, and what are some of your biggest mistakes and regrets that you hope that other collegiate esports programs can learn from?
For me, I would say it's definitely, I mentioned it briefly with a lot of the larger organizations and a lot of people not necessarily knowing how to approach each other to collaborate. But I think another problem is a lot of universities kind of going into it and not really building up the community side of things, which is really important for a competitive program. Your school, obviously, it's like you go to the big football games and there's a big fan base. Having students there that support, what you do in the team, the sense of community and the camaraderie is hugely important to a successful program. The first year at UTA that we had the program, was virtually every student on the team was in the club the previous years before we were even there. And so it's a huge passionate community. I'm just making sure they're involved and excited to be there is hugely important for the program, I think.
Greg?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a mistake, but just something as a piece of advice is to utilize all of your resources on campus to see how esports can spread out across campus, because we obviously talk about the competitive and the community aspect, but we don't talk a lot about the education aspect. And that's something about college esports that's unique, is it takes place on a college campus. There's students that are participating in the programs that are there to compete and play in community, but they're there to get their degree. So finding ways that you can include esports in an academic world. What about with our marketing? What about with our production? How can we get esports throughout campus? I've met with a bunch of teachers on our campus or professors that are like, how can we get esports into our curriculum? What are ways we can include it? So there's no esports degree, but there's ways to introduce esports into the academic world. And for a lot of these students, they take what they're learning in their classroom and then they apply their passion of esports to that classroom learning. So for a lot of them, their esports program at a college level could be the only experience they need to get an esports job or to get a big time esports internship of some kind. So find ways to branch out within your university and connect to different departments across the campus.
Gotcha. And then Dylan, okay. So we're gonna do the dedicated Q&A at the end then. And Dylan, what about your thoughts on your biggest mistakes, regrets, or even just biggest lessons learned?
So I think lessons learned, and I think it's reflective across the three programs that we have in this panel, is that we've kind of learned less is more when it comes to a varsity program. You kind of see in the professional esport landscape, there's a ton of competitive titles that are out there, that have really awesome leagues, like Dota 2 and the International has the biggest prize pool in esports, not in the collegiate scene, right? Or Counter-Strike, one of the biggest competitive esport titles that it's out there, is not really big in the collegiate scene. And so there's a lot of factors and kind of goes into the games that we choose. But realistically, our programs can only support so many teams at a high caliber at the competitive level. And so I think, when we first started, we did start with more teams and operated a bit more like you'd see in a traditional club. But over the years, we've narrowed our focus and realized that our resources need to be focused on a smaller group of people for them to be competitively successful.
Gotcha. And that's worked out pretty well for you guys, for all of you actually. So I guess we'll move on to like the bigger picture stuff, not just like isolated to Texas. But since we mainly do event and club sponsorships at UConnect, I don't really I talk a lot with student organization leaders, but not much with like varsity program leaders, just because it's a different space. But what are some of the biggest problems and frustrations right now in collegiate esports on a national scale? Both from a varsity program perspective as well as overall, if you have anything in that space. Drew, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. For me, personally, one thing that sometimes, not always, I mean, it has its pros and cons, but sometimes a lack of structure for some of the tournaments or events that we participate in. It's really nice in some aspects because it allows a lot of the scheduling kind of to fall to us as the team, like, hey, what works best for you, what works best for us, okay, we kind of, make it work. But there would be, in some instances, it would be really nice to have a more structured season as, a lot of these tournaments are put on, but honestly, that's kind of changing. There's a lot more structure being put into a lot of these. It's, like Greg mentioned earlier, it's kind of still in its infancy to a degree. And so I think, it's getting better as time goes on, but I think there could still be a little bit more structure to collegiate esports as a whole in terms of, just even the tournaments that are put on, letting people know schedules ahead of time, that kind of thing.
Dylan, do you want to? What are your thoughts from your perspective?
Sure. I think there's two kind of big things that I think I've kind of identified as sort of where we are in our growth for collegiate esports. And I think one big weakness that collegiate esports have is that there's a pretty big learning curve from not only a program development standpoint, but from sort of like a fan standpoint as well. Because there's a lot of leagues and tournaments that are out there and they don't follow, or at least most of them don't follow like your traditional athletic leagues. I think League of Legends and Riot have done a really good job with like the Mountain West Conference, which was really cool to see. And I think more things like that is what I'd love to see in collegiate esports, where kind of the same core schools that we compete against, with our football team or, our basketball team, would be kind of what you'd expect to be the folks that we play the most, in esports, obviously including our local rivalries as well. But I think that's kind of a big element. I think the latter, and I apologize, Greg, if I'm stealing this from you, but I think the latter is kind of forward schedule planning,
Gotcha.
where basically, I remember last semester I got the entire football schedule for UNT, regardless of whether COVID was going to prevent them from playing or not playing. But in spring, I already knew exactly what UNT was going to compete in, and esports is not there yet. And I think that's hard for upper administration to kind of acknowledge or get behind or get excited about. And so it's kind of something that, because we're not just a club, we answer to, the university as a whole is what our program is competing in, and, who we're competing against next week, which sometimes I don't always have the answers to because of how some of the tournament structures are set up. And so I think that's something that could definitely be improved.
Gotcha. So kind of borrowing from those football rivalries to kind of grow that story, because I know because you guys are so focused on competitive, you guys have been able to create some great rivalry stories, and that's like even from like the beginning years, that's always been collegiate, like until like recently, viewership has always been a problem because people only followed their schools. They only they really didn't have any background in any of these teams, so it's hard to like care about some other Southern school unless you kind of know that team a little bit, right? Greg, what about your thoughts as a varsity program leader? Like, what do you see? What are some of the biggest problems you see?
Sure. So I think it's great that varsity programs across the nation are growing. Like we're seeing more and more every year factually, but I think it has to we have to get to a place where the expectations for these programs and expectations from administration is kind of in a place where it's comfortable within the industry. So each program is going to be housed differently, whether it be under athletics, student affairs, IT, I've seen it. It really, whatever is best for the university. But the big thing is recognizing from the administration that no matter what you're under, you have to have set goals in mind that are appropriate for the program itself. You know, meeting community, meeting competition, meeting research. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see a varsity program, you know, hiring a coach or an admin, and then they're like, oh yeah, it's part-time. And it's, they don't recognize the amount of work that goes into these programs and the amount of time and effort that it takes. But, you know, so I think a universal recognition of what these programs are consisting of, outside of just competing teams, and kind of setting up your goals and expectations when starting a program to get to that place. You know, so just identifying what the needs are of your campus and how can we really create this position and this in kind of our program as a whole to meet that specifically.
Gotcha. So I'm hearing like you know, more planned ahead, scheduling, consistency, you know, possibly mirroring the conferences that we see in traditional sports, and then also like having a clear plan moving forward on how to build the program. Are some of the biggest problems that you guys are seeing right now, which is really interesting because I don't really hear a lot about you know, this side of collegiate esports too much. But we've seen a lot of big changes in the collegiate ecosystem recently that have been like kind of exacerbated by COVID. As a result, we've seen a lot of like old established entities kind of falling off or like dying down a little bit, and this huge influx of new entities that are entering the scene. So what are your thoughts on this like ensuing chaos, this like void of, I guess, power, if you want to call it that? And what are some of the biggest changes that you're excited or worried about?
Well, I'll start this one off. I don't necessarily know if I see a void. I think it's kind of two outlets. I think, number one, you obviously in a world where in-person events are not happening. They might happen to an extent, but pretty much across the board, they're not happening. But I think because of that, you've seen a lot more online activation. I mean, like even over the last 3 weeks, the professional esports organization Evil Geniuses partnered with UCLA to host an online tournament series. Hugh Fest, which is ran by Harrisburg, big 64-team tournament, all online. So I think the biggest benefit of COVID is it gives a lot more accessibility for schools to compete in these events without having to worry about budget or, you know, monetary concerns for traveling. So I think it creates a world where teams are able to have larger accessibility toward these events, and it also encourages more organizations to host events, right? Because it's a lot easier to host a totally online event than it is to with an online and an in-person event. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more people kind of step up and try to take a leadership role in hosting events and kind of organizations as a whole. So I think down in the long run, it'll kind of help build that out.
Yeah, and I've seen. I think it's forced schools to kind of create these new sponsorship properties, because before it was just like live events and that's pretty much all you could sell, or it was like varsity program reach and all that stuff, right? Like arenas and stuff. But now like you're forcing these schools to build out, hey, like what about our online presence, our Discord events and stuff like that, so that when we come out of COVID, hopefully we have that full suite of activations that we can kind of take advantage of. And you mentioned Evil Genius. I have to mention like one of our sponsors as well. Like you know, we've been doing Cloud9 watch parties, you know, which is more like heavily toward the social event aspect, but you know, those have gone on really well too. You see this whole wave of teams that are trying to engage students on an online level. But what about Dylan? Can you tell us a little bit about you know, what you're excited about, some big changes you've been seeing, and your thoughts on that?
So like from an internal perspective, one thing that I've loved to see like in our community is like various departments, like even outside of UNT Esports, are using gaming as a way of keeping students connected to college, you know, which is, you know, one of the reasons why I'm a huge advocate of esports in the collegiate space in the first place, is that value of that social connection in gaming that kind of ties you to the university. But that idea has kind of like caught fire with other departments on campus doing like, hey, you know, we'll do a Jackbox night on Fridays, or you know, we'll play some other social games like Among Us and stuff like that, just to get students engaged in some of these departments, which I think has been really neat to see. As far as like the other tournaments that are out there, it's been really honestly fantastic. That we actually have the problem of like, wait, this weekend we actually have to decide which event we want to go to.
Right.
From a digital competitive standpoint, which is great for our teams, for UTD, for UTA, and UNT, because we just get more competition. So our players are going to kind of grow as a result. So for businesses and folks thinking about creating these tournaments, there's a big need in our program for them. And so, we're always going to be excited to participate in an event or a tournament. So that's been really cool to see.
So I've actually talked to this with a couple people in the collegiate esports scene now, but with this whole like emergency button, hey, shoot, we have to do esports now because everything else is canceled. All the traditional sports are canceled. Have you like seen a trend? Have you seen like any signs that maybe schools are trying to jump into, like, whereas before they may have neglected esports a little bit, and this may not apply as much as you guys because they've already kind of invested in you guys, but have you seen them kind of jump in like a little bit too, like kind of jump the shark a bit, like, oh, like we need to generate revenue and like maybe jump ahead a couple steps too much than what collegiate esports is ready for on your scene, on your campus?
Yeah, I don't feel like it's appropriate to name names, but there have been universities that have reached out to us that aren't as far along in their program's development. They're like, wait a second, like esports is great right now, and obviously for our three universities, we've been able to provide, various programmings like esport intramurals and other things like that. But yeah, there have been universities that have reached out to us to kind of get a good idea of what the scene looks like and stuff like that.
Drew, what about your thoughts? On the whole, like, not just on the original question, like, what are you excited about and stuff, but also like, have you seen like, are you guys seeing a trend of like over pushing collegiate esports or jumping the shark, or have things been pretty normal on y'all's end?
So yeah, at UT everything is going pretty well, obviously. No issues over here, even within a lot of the North Texas schools. What I've noticed actually is, we've been reached out to, some people asking for advice on what to do, how to go about it, which is perfectly fine. It's normal. People, it's like I mentioned earlier, one thing I love about just the collegiate esports community is just how willing everybody is to work together, even with your closest rivals. But I do think there are some groups or administrations or just whomever who might look at it kind of in the wrong way, in the sense that it might be like a revenue generation machine, because a lot of people throw out those numbers like, oh, esports brings in this much money every year. And then it's almost like hamstringing the program from the get-go before they even launch, because just the perspective of the whole thing isn't about representing the school necessarily as best you can and competing and making sure that it actually increases, like, this makes the student experience better overall. And it's more like how can we start making money off of this kind of thing. And so I think people the universities just need to be very careful and not skip those very important steps of making sure they get someone who knows what they're doing in there. They focus on the right aspects of the program. But I mean, one thing I love about esports is that it just so easily, with the pandemic, esports, it's so just naturally we move it online. It stinks not being able to see everybody in person and have those LAN events and everything, but it was a relatively easy transition for us. And so with that, a lot of opportunities have popped up. And, a lot of universities are doing it the right way, where it's like they see the opportunity and they were already thinking about it. And so it's like, hey, maybe now's the time to really get in on it and really push a solid program. But as Dylan mentioned, I love the amount of tournaments that are out there. A lot of smaller organizations that have been surprisingly actually really good, hosting some awesome events. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's where North Texas kind of, because South Texas was so focused on the community side. Now that live events aren't happening, there are some social events happening, but I feel like this is the time when North Texas really shines with their specialty, I guess. I just want to talk a little bit about like what's next for you guys. What needs to happen? What do you think needs to happen to take collegiate esports to the next level? Like, where do you guys see like the biggest jump happening, where you guys are like, okay, this is like what we need to push next to really bring collegiate esports to like that next step, like the way you guys were talking about, like developing it responsibly, right? And what are some entities that you guys support that you guys think are going the right direction? I guess we'll start with Dylan.
Sure. I think to talk about collegiate esports, I think we kind of have to address high school esports, because I think, especially in the DFW area, from what we've seen, it's honestly growing faster than we are. the amount of like high schools that are creating esport programs for their students to the point where it looks a lot more like a viable pipeline of, potentially middle school to high school to college for esports, which didn't necessarily exist on a wide scale a couple years back. So I think that's kind of been a fascinating point that, like, if you're a really good athlete in high school, you now kind of have two options where you could potentially go pro or you could go collegiate. And there's people in the high school setting that are supporting you, which has been really cool to see. And I think collegiate in general benefits from that. So I think that's something that I've really loved to see. So I guess talking about high school, I guess I'd have to shout out to TexIF, which is a Texas confederation of high school programs, and that's been really cool to see. On the competitive collegiate,
Greg, what about you? What do you think? What do you want to see that collegiate esports take next step?
Sure. So I think a lot of people talk about like a pipeline, like a path to pro, but I don't necessarily think that has to be that way. I mean, you have collegiate, you have amateur, and you have pro. There should be a pipeline that allows all three to coexist and to go from one to the other, right? So there's nothing that's saying that retired professional esports athletes can't go back to collegiate, and there's nothing that's saying that like the top end of amateur can't go back to collegiate, or even college go to amateur or pro as a possible pathway. So I think identifying that it's a pipeline between all three that's universal, that if all of them are improving and getting better, then it's going to do nothing but support each other as a whole. And so I think across the board, it's just recognizing that if you create these opportunities for collaboration and you create these valuable opportunities at college programs for these pros to get into, or even vice versa, then you're only just going to make it that much better for people to improve. I mean, some organizations that have been doing it well, like Kevin Huang from Twitch Student, that goes by Kabumbun, does a great job. Every week he hosts panels and things like that on his Twitch stream. I mentioned it before, but Evil Geniuses has a college Discord server where they review students' resumes and they bring in people from their organization to talk to college students. So I think the big thing is just creating opportunities and recognizing that it doesn't end in pro. Pro can go back to college, and college can go to wherever, vice versa with amateur. So recognizing that the pipeline is kind of universal across the board.
I've also seen, I think based on what I've seen from UCI and some other schools, we've even seen like, I think it's a more prevalent thing where like pro players will, like after they're kind of like past their prime or however you want to say it, they actually go back to college, and it's easier for them to compete in the collegiate level, and they get a free education. It's almost like serving in the military, where like, well, I don't want to. It's not the exact like same, but like you get my point, where you like go to the military first, and then you kind of get to go to an education after. So it's kind of that first process. But Drew, what about you? Like, what are the next big steps, do you think, in collegiate esports?
I think something really massive that would help a lot is something we all kind of have touched on, and I mentioned briefly at the beginning too, which is just kind of making the structure a little bit more solidified. But not necessarily even for us, but for administrators and then just parents and students and everybody, because it's a lot of these games can be pretty confusing just to watch if you don't know what's going on. Which is one reason I love Rocket League specifically, because it's just anyone happening. But if there were ways that people could go in, and actually see, just like football, this is the season, this is how it's laid out, this is how it all works. I think just that would be massive for the industry as a whole, and help parents understand what's going on, help people who just randomly tune in. My alma mater is competing in this game, let me go watch it, and they can easily understand like how the season works, what's happening in the tournament. I think that would be really big. Just being able to get outsiders who haven't really played a lot of these games before involved or excited about what's happening.
Gotcha. So I know we have a list of questions, but I want to touch upon something else real quick. So sponsorships is obviously sponsorships and brand activations are a big part of esports as a whole, right? In the past, we've seen a lot of brand involvement in like social stuff, like activations at LANs and stuff like that. A lot of that is backed by like social media reach, all that stuff. How do you guys value your clubs or try and sell to sponsors as a varsity program? You know, does it center around like how many? Do you kind of leverage like the reach of the tournaments you're playing in, or do you guys leverage your social media, or like what are those different pieces that you add together to be like, hey, we're worth investing in? You know, like you guys should sponsor us. I guess we'll start with Drew.
Yeah, I know the club at UTA is phenomenal, like massive. They're huge, great group of passionate students. And so, yeah, you know, one of the things that I really want to do more and what we've been working on is just working with them. You know, they do some awesome events. And I mean, you know, as much as we can support them, there are ways that we help them out. You know, I love being able to do that. And it is really useful, you know, for some of those potential sponsorships and that kind of thing. Because it's like, yeah, kind of some of the logistics and things that you mentioned. It's like, oh, this many students attend our events. And then we have, you know, those big tournaments. Like I think CRL's done a really good job with a lot of their streams and broadcasting production, and getting, you know, hey, you know, we compete in these tournaments. This many eyeballs actually get on our team, and you know, with interviews, that kind of stuff. But yeah, the club at UTA has been phenomenal, and I think they're definitely almost one of the best selling points. You know, it's because they're the community behind the varsity program, and so you know, being able to show that we have a lot of student engagement is really huge, and you know, they're our biggest fans, and so I think they're definitely one of the biggest tools and the most passionate base that we have out there.
So UTA, I guess, from your perspective, you guys like sell as a package almost, right? Like we have this varsity program with its unique selling points, and we also have the club with its unique selling points. And so you guys, you know, are kind of like intertwined or whatever. It's kind of more of a package deal then.
Yeah, there's a lot of collaboration. Yeah, we utilize the same Discord servers often. It's yeah, there's not necessarily overlap, but in a way there's just so much. You know, people that are in the varsity teams often play with the club teams and that kind of stuff too on the side. You know, it just really depends. But yeah, there's a lot of that cohesion.
Gotcha. And I know since varsity programs are so like new, well, they're not new, but like it's still developing the scene. Like eventually, like there'll be more ways to kind of value like a varsity program, right? So. Greg, what are your thoughts on like how do you show value as a varsity program?
Sure. So I think it kind of mixes all of those together. But like I think it's also finding a unique relationship with the sponsors that you're looking to bring in, right? So there's a couple of things that we do. The first thing is, you know, we talk about our social media branding from getting sponsors and names out there, but we also create custom banners for all of our esports athletes and just coaches and people, whoever wants it. We create custom banners for them that show that they're representing UTD that also have our sponsors on there. So not only are we representing us through the university and like through our own pages, but now all of our students are representing these sponsors as well. And the second thing is finding unique relationships and opportunities within esports specifically. So as an example, Sector 7, who's one of our biggest sponsors, every year we have an event where our Smash team goes and plays against their members of their university, of their company in like games. And so it's like it's always a blast for them. They have a lot of fun. You know, we stream it and things like that. So a lot of these companies that are getting into esports recognize the monetary value, but they also care about gaming and esports. They're getting into it because there's someone at the company that said, "Oh, I'm a gamer. There's a lot of money here. How can we partner with this university?" And then from there expand upon it. Like another event that we did is there's a company that sponsors us that essentially has their own League of Legends tournament within their company, and then we stream and broadcast the finals for them. And you know, we have our casters and stuff like that, and they're all like silver and gold players. They're having a blast. But the fact that we're able to put on production for them and kind of put it on that next level is an extra little bonus on top for them. And they're like, okay, this is awesome. Like we've experienced people that are supporting our little collaborative community effort. So I think finding unique ways to represent esports and gaming within your sponsorships will really help a lot.
Gotcha. So I'm seeing a little bit of a reflection, basically like I don't want to say borrowing, but like you know, taking some of the ways that that normal athletics like bring value to sponsors and kind of utilizing that unique esports way, right? Dylan, what about you? Like, where do you see how do you sell value to sponsors, and how do you see in the future like gathering up that that data to kind of show value?
Yeah, so I think what I like about working in the collegiate space is that you have, you know, hard numbers that you can show to businesses, but you also have like the student experience and being to be able to potentially tap into the student community on your campus, I think is kind of the main approach that we look at. So for instance, ViewSonic was one of our sponsors last year, and they had a really nice 240 hertz monitor they wanted to show off to the gaming community, and by providing that to students just to simply be able to use, advertise their product, got more students to try it out, and it was essentially a win-win for all parties involved. And so it's kind of unique experiences like that I think make a lot of sense for the two organizations to get together. And the students win because they get access to, whether it's a really cool technology or maybe it's a really cool product. And then the business obviously succeeds with getting their product in a new market that's starting to emerge, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah. So I guess we'll save some time for Q&A. But what are some ways, some things that your program is working on that you are excited about, or anything else that you want to give a shout out to? We'll start with Drew.
For us, I'd definitely say education. I know Greg talked about it briefly, but educational opportunities. So, it's really neat when we have, these big tournaments and they'll stream games and they have tons of eyeballs. But, one thing that I'm working on too, as we build out our space, is actually having, these educational opportunities for students, ways that they can get involved, and it helps the program as well. But, definitely having students that might be into marketing. They can help make, the marketing materials, help reach out. Students that really want to get into broadcast production. Well, hey, we're doing streams. We have all this stuff behind the scenes that makes everything run smoothly, shoutcasting, photography, that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of, all different walks of life, all these different people that might have different majors that want to get experience. There are ways that they can get involved with the program that's not just playing the games, but behind the scenes, other kinds of roles that they can do. And so that's just being fleshed out. And, they're in college for a reason. And, being able to provide them with these educational opportunities is huge. And I think the esports program is definitely one of the most unique and coolest ways, honestly, out there for people to get experience. And it won't just help them in esports, but, anywhere that they want to go.
It can be argued that, honestly, most companies probably only care about their experience with a varsity program or an esports club. Everything else is pretty irrelevant. I'm never going to use my economics degree on anything in esports or anything or maybe I will. I don't know. But as far from what I've seen in a lot of recruiters and stuff like that, they the collegiate experience is definitely weighs heavily. But it's almost like a pathway to an esports career that kind of runs parallel to that competitive pathway. Greg, what about you? What are you guys working on that you're really excited about, or what do you want to give a shout out to?
Sure. So this year I'm excited. We have a lot of professional collaboration. Like on Tuesday, our Overwatch team is in a practice, and Tickety, who is the Canada national coach, is coming in and watching our practice and streaming it from his perspective and giving feedback. And then another opportunity is Gangsho Charge. We're actually reaching out, and our coaches, our student coaches, are getting a chance to interview and talk to the coaches of their team and the members of their team. So I think a big thing for me is kind of going off Drew with educating, but giving our students these higher opportunities and these opportunities to really grow and get into that professional field. If the professionals can come and educate and provide their knowledge, it's only going to help college programs get better. And then if they get better, then it's going to help the whole scene get better. So I think we have a lot of professional opportunities to kind of on the horizon. And I think those are going to be a lot of fun.
Gotcha. That sounds great. Dylan, what are you guys working on, and or what do you want to give a shout out to?
Sure. I think I'm really excited this year about the opportunity of basically being a 100% digital entity, which I think obviously as esports is our strength of being very resilient to COVID. But I think with a 100% focus on our digital presence, with our media arts department that's on campus, I'm really kind of excited to see that grow. Some folks from that department actually helped us out when the crisis first started because we realized we were really good at video editing and streaming and stuff like that. And so, some of our students actually helped the rec fitness department digitize, workouts and stuff like that, and actually help them and kind of transition gears a little bit when everything was very chaotic and uncertain. And I just wanted to shout out Dylan Akery on my team for really kind of stepping up and helping out with that, because that was really cool to see, and just kind of an esport expertise that ended up actually being very helpful to a lot of people in keeping their jobs and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And Dylan, if I can give a small shout out, I think one thing about this group of individuals that we have here is that's awesome. Is I've never heard of anything else like this in the nation, but we've all met up in person multiple times. Myself, the two individuals, Drew and Dylan, in the call, but also Eugene Fryer from Texas Wesleyan, Michael Aguilar from Oklahoma. We've literally met in person, had food, and just talked about what our years are like, what struggles we're going through. And so I think, like we talk about like the fact that we all collaborate and stuff like that, but I think a lot of that comes from top down. The fact that we meet as much as we do and we talk and we kind of just work together all the time, I think it's a really great sign for the future of college esports. The fact that we all care so much about our industry growing that we're literally meeting in person to do so. So we're really creating a community among our schools through esports, and I think that's a really great plan for the future.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the big positive about our community is that like we're able to, like, if something good is happening, it kind of spreads like wildfire, because we're all so close to each other. If something bad happens, we can also spread that like wildfire. Even going back to that, I think like the moment that Collegiate Esports kicked off was, I know this was like boomer stuff, but this is like in 2015, like the Riot Collegiate Summit. I think like when that was the last one that they ever did, and I think when that stopped happening, people were like trying to fill that void. But Riot flew out all these collegiate leaders. We all got to meet everybody from across the country in this like super expensive 75 school summit, and then after that they stopped doing that. And then TESPA kind of did their smaller leadership summits every year, which was like really impactful for all those students. Got to network across all these like different states and countries. But now like you're seeing a lot more like regional stuff. Like we'll meet up like among Texas schools. Like we'll meet up at DreamHack. Like shout out to DreamHack. At DreamHack Atlanta, at DreamHack Anaheim, we have these like little summits where everybody from the region, even people from Texas came, and we all got to like network and go together. So we're seeing less of like a giant summit and more of like, hey, let's all meet up at this convention or at this convention, kind of networking among each other. But yeah, cool. So I think we'll move into Q&A now. But
we have about time for one question. Sorry, everybody.
Okay, no problem.
This is a question that Aditya first chimed in on, and Peyton also weighed in here. So I've simplified the question to this. As a person who has an interest in esports, what is the best way to get involved? I'm talking more about helping run the organization rather than being a player, with Peyton chiming in that I would also like to know how to get involved as someone who is not attending these schools.
So
I go ahead and tackle it. Oh, go ahead, Don. Okay, so I think if you're a student at a school is one thing, but I think one way or the other, number one, you have to identify what you want to do. So I think it's great that you have the initiative that you want to get involved, but I think that's the first step. The second step is like, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to manage a team? Do I want to run a stream? Do I want to help promote the program? Do I want to do marketing? You have to identify what you specifically want to do in esports and how you bring value to that want specifically. I want to do marketing. Here's some social media posts that I could do. I want to do production. Here's a stream that I ran on my own. So it's great that you want to get involved, but the most important thing is identifying where you want to get involved, how you want to get involved, and how you being a part of the program is going to help the program get better.
Yeah, and if like, so it's like if you are part of a university, it's pretty straightforward. You volunteer for the esports organization on campus. You kind of like, you're gonna have to do a lot of like extra work, but you kind of just like go up the rankings there. If you're not part of a collegiate organization, I would say you probably want to build up some experience with some other entities and then show how you can bring value to that organization. So like volunteer for DreamHack, or be part of their apply for their ambassador program, or you're gonna have to do a lot of free work. Esports does involve a lot of free work, and there's a limit to how much you should do. But if you do free work, make sure that you're learning from it. You're gathering up that knowledge, and you're not just like doing grunt work, right? It's either like you either do something for money or you do something for the learning experience, but you have to gain something from it. But yeah, I would definitely. I guess that's what I would do. Dylan or Drew?
I think, I mean, a lot of it obviously depends on, if you're a student or if you're, in college or if you're beyond college. And I mean, if you're in like a K through 12 situation, shout out to like Burleson ISD where I went, like they're huge in esports. There's a lot of ways to get involved. They even have middle school teams competing at like insanely high levels. When we actually had Rocket League tryouts, we had a middle schooler actually filled the application and like, hey, you don't want to, and his rankings are just as high as a lot of these college students. And so there's plenty of ways to be involved potentially within, a lot of these local ISDs. And if there's not, there's ways to go about it, even if it's, setting it up kind of on your own. If you're in college, like you mentioned, it's pretty straightforward. You can, if there's not an organization or a varsity program on campus, then you can often like make the organization yourself and start it off. Like I mentioned, the UTA Esports Club, they were here before the varsity program was, and that they were a huge organization. There's, I want to say almost 2,000 people in the Discord server right now that they have. And so it's massive. And outside of that, just going off of what you said, Dylan, it's just getting that experience. It's invaluable. There are a lot of groups you could, reach out to about, volunteer opportunities and that kind of thing. And so it's a small industry in a way. And I think you can get pretty far if you're just willing to put in the work and try to get experience by helping out an organization or some other entity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Dylan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think regardless if you're in college or if you're in high school, I think the one thing we could probably all agree on is that you have to work hard to kind of get in. I don't really know anybody that just accidentally ended up in the esports industry. There's a lot of people that worked really, really hard picking up jobs, picking up internships while they're already in college, or if they aren't in college, they're involved in so many different organizations to kind of get their name out. But also, if you are in college, remember to get good grades. Or if you're in high school, remember to get good grades. You could be really, really good at esports, but if you have poor grades, it's really tough to get into college. And also stay in our programs. So stay good in school.
Yeah.
All right.
So Justin, should we wrap it up or?
I wish we could answer more questions from the audience. I feel bad that we can only do one, but we have another panel in 2 minutes. So
okay.
Thank you.
Can I just do one really quick?
Please do.
Yeah. So the high school thing, really quick. If there is an esports elective credit, I don't think it's just going to be overall esports. It'll either be under production or marketing, but it's like too broad of a subject to just do it like, hey, it's esports. It would be like streaming or something like that, or like you would do an overview of like all these different like subjects in esports. In the esports elective thing, but like most likely it would be like hard skills like production, stuff like that, rather than just like broad like learning about what esports is, because knowing what esports is doesn't provide a lot of value, but the specific skills that are needed in esports are like I think are really valuable. Anyway, Justin, I guess if you want to wrap it up. Yeah.
I appreciate y'all for taking the time. Special shout out to Dylan for giving me so many DreamHack shout outs. I'm sure I can coast with that alone. No jokes. Seriously, thank you all so much for jumping into the Collegiate Esports panel with us. Feel free to connect with all these folks on LinkedIn. They really are extraordinary when it comes to the work that they're doing in this space. Every single one of them. And we really are lucky to have them just allot some time to give us some insights. As always, continue the conversation on LinkedIn as well as the Dallas Startup Week Slack. And I'll see you in a minute for the Women in Gaming and Esports panel. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.